Today on Doomed! Today's episode of Doomed is anything but doomed, actually, as we discuss in a very positive way, actually, the future of progressive campaigns, really across the country. Right after the midterms, we're just a few days after the midterms, actually, and fresh off of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's huge history-making win. In addition to all the other huge history-making wins all across the nation, we have Leo Sussan joining us. He's the co-founder of Reach, and probably most importantly, when you take into account everything I just said, he's also the technology director for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's 2018 campaign. Leo, I'm going to pull you up on YouTube right now so everyone can see your beautiful face. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well. It's been a great couple of days.
Oh, I can imagine.
I mean, how could anything be any better than such a grand and historical victory? I'm still blown away by it all.
Right, and it was a close race with Joe Crowley's independent flyer campaign, right?
Oh yeah, very very close, down to the wire.
Oh boy, that was funny. I enjoyed that. That some guy. Apparently, and I believe him, being that there was no real, there was no votes that came in, really. Some guy decided to take it upon himself, or some woman, who knows, to flyer for an independent Joe Crowley run after he lost the primary.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't an independent. It was for so Joe Crowley prior to the primary also secured the endorsement of the Working Families Party. And so after Alexandria won the primary, Joe Crowley actually was still on the ballot after the fact because of that endorsement as well. Now, they came out after the fact and they said, we've made a mistake. We would like Joe Crowley to leave the ballot, and it's up to him to do so. Joe chose not to do that for his own reasons. So we were running against him, and actually two other candidates, if I'm not mistaken. So it was still a packed ballot. It wasn't a sure thing, and even had it been, it's Alexandria's kind of thought process that all victories have to be earned. They can't just be assumed. So even if the campaign was assumed to be a lock, we wanted to campaign as if our lives depended on it, and we did. I mean, we were out in force up until the day of the election. Right.
So I didn't mean to start talking about Joe Crowley, but. Well, just a funny little thing. I personally, actually, first time ever I did this, I just felt compelled to, speaking of someone who was endorsed by the Working Families Party, but found a way to get off the Working Families Party line. I couldn't bring myself to vote for Cuomo, and I knew he was going to win very easily. So that's why I felt comfortable to... I wrote in, because it just felt right, I wrote in Cynthia Nixon. So
You're a petty one.
Right. I just had to do it. First time I've ever done that. I even voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. So I actually brought you on this show not to discuss progressive and Democratic Party pettiness.
I mean, there's always a part of that in all this.
Right. And there's really weird thing going on the YouTube stream right now where there's somehow two simultaneous YouTube streams running with our feed going. I don't know why this is happening. But that is what's happening, apparently.
Okay.
So let's discuss what I brought you on to discuss. So you really I've actually been I should also set the stage here. So I have been talking to you over this is about, I think, our third or fourth time talking. I'm actually working on a piece for Mashable where I ask you about this. I'm gonna call it, it's cliche, but I think it fits. I'm gonna call it a game changer of an app for political campaigns, especially in this case with how you're making sure it's being used with progressive political campaigns. And so let's start with that. So this app is called Reach. Can you tell us a little bit about it? I guess let's start with what does it do? That's so crazy.
Yeah. So it requires just a little bit of context, and I'll try not to bore everybody. But back before the primary, for those of you who have worked on political campaigns for you, I'd imagine a lot have not. The name NGP Van probably comes to mind. Van is a very large software company in the Democratic kind of political space, and they have produced a number of different tools. One of the main ones is called Vote Builder, and it's used to collect what are referred to as IDs. They're just references to folks whom they know are either voting for or voting against the candidate. And so most of a campaign is built around the collection of IDs by virtue of having conversations with voters and going in and marking those conversations and their support scores. The problem came, and this was very clear to myself, but more so to my co-founder. So my co-founder of Reach his name is Jake DeGroot. He was also on the campaign with me on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign, and he and I both did canvassing. I was working on the technology, but he realized that that Vote Builder was limiting whom we could talk to, right? Because the way Vote Builder works is you go out and you have a list of people you're supposed to talk to. You knock on those doors, you talk to them, and you go home. But that's not really how politics should work, is it? I mean, you should be able to talk to anybody, have a conversation with anybody. Everything is political now. You can have a political conversation with your bank teller, or go to the grocery store, the person who's bagging, your groceries, your Uber driver, your taxi driver, anybody. None of those interactions are considered electorally relevant because you can't really do something with that on the spot. So at the time we built this thing, I should say Jake built the first version of this thing called Van Go in an evening. Our campaign manager, he talked to him, he said, this would be really cool, can I build this? And he said, no, that'll take forever, it's a waste of time. So he stayed up all night and built it in 24 hours and showed it to me, and I was like, this is really cool. And within 3 days, we had it in the hands of a ton of different canvassers. They were going out and talking to anybody. They would set up tables in subways. And what ended up happening is the ethos and the thought process around how campaigning works and how talking to voters works began to change internally, even as we only had about 3 weeks prior to the election. And so within those 3 weeks, we ended up collecting, quote unquote, collecting, so talking to more than 1,000 voters that were then marked on that early version. We called it at the time Van Go, in relation to the company Van.
Right.
So that number turns out it was a substantial percentage of the IDs of the IDs that we collected on the campaign. And so the question then became, after the primary, we started getting all of this attention. So the question then became, what do we do with this next? And it really wasn't ready for prime time at the time. It was really just built for us. So the question then became, okay, here are all these other campaigns. They're asking us about this. What do we do? And the answer ended up becoming, we're going to have to build this. We're going to have to build this from scratch and make it scalable inherently and get it to as many progressive campaigns as humanly possible. And we take that really seriously. We don't want every campaign using something like this. We want to try and create an unfair advantage for progressive campaigns from the technology side of things.
Right. So let's really, I guess, explain this for people in terms of just how different this app is from other apps. So explain. I guess what the most popular canvassing app is probably NGP Van's own app, right? Minivan.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit, like just like a minute of like just how does Minivan work, and then let's go into how Reach really takes this to the next level.
Yeah. So Minivan, the way it works, you go to a campaign headquarters. They say download Minivan. You download Minivan. They give you a list number. You put the list number in the app, and you have a certain amount of time, a list of people for whom you are supposed to go out and talk to. That list is typically generated by the campaign. You go, you knock on those doors, and you come back, and that is essentially the end of it. What we tried to do is we tried to take the opinionation out of how a person campaigns. So you have to be invited by somebody, but it can be anybody who's been invited to that instance for the campaign on Reach. So anybody who's working for the campaign or a volunteer for the campaign can invite you. You then have an open-ended search interface. You can put in the name or address of a person, typically just the name of the person. Their voter file will pop up. A lot of the information ends up being masked for privacy reasons, but the profile comes up, you confirm, and you mark them down, and that's it. So if you meet a person and you know their name, you can mark them as a potential supporter, and that hooks them into the wide apparatus of like get out the vote efforts and of phone banking efforts that the campaign is doing in addition to in-person canvassing.
Right. So I really want to, I think this could get a bit wonky for people, actually.
That's true, and I'm being very wonky. I'm sorry about that.
No, you're actually explaining it probably in the simplest imaginable terms. It just very much is wonky, but I really want people to understand. I guess, sort of explain what the issue is actually with traditional canvassing when you just are I guess stuck using an app like Minivan where you're basically going off this list. And explain to us also at the same time where this list comes from of Democratic voters.
Yeah, so the list itself, though, that data is publicly available. It's from the Board of Elections and from the state parties. They know who is a registered voter, and they have a generalized understanding of if you voted and if you're a Democrat or a Republican. They don't know who you voted for, but they know if you voted. That's where the general list comes from. What ends up happening after the fact is these campaign people, like usually data folks, will create what are referred to as universes. Those are people who are quote unquote likely voters, or people who are thought to be as somebody who might be supportive. Those are then cut into walk lists. Those walk lists are then give to volunteers and campaign supporters, and then those people go out and they canvass them from door to door. The problem with that, in my opinion, it's efficient, right? But it presumes a certain level of involvement by the end, by the person that you'd end up being talking to. So if you haven't voted in the past, or let's say you're a young person, you haven't voted before, or you haven't voted in a primary in the past or a midterm in the past, you're considered to not be a quote unquote triple prime voter, right? And that's in itself exclusionary. So in my estimation of what the Democratic Party should look like, or what a modern Democratic Party should look like, we should never assume anything about anybody really. We should proceed it as if anybody can be convinced, right? As if you can talk to anybody, have a conversation with anybody, regardless of whether they voted in the last 5 elections. Have conversations with young people, activate them, right? I subscribe to the belief that most folks who haven't voted probably haven't done so because they haven't been asked to before haven't been directly involved by a campaign before. I personally, I was never reached out to by any of these campaigns, and I actually have voted in the last couple of elections, right? And so the question becomes, who's being left out by that process? I think one of the kind of inherent one of the fondnesses that I have for Reach in general is that anybody can be engaged against. Anybody can become involved in the political process. And then the last bit, I'm sorry I'm going on forever. No. The last bit is that it doesn't end at the door, right? So usually after you've done with your list, you go home and that's it. But Reach is designed to be kind of persistent, so you have access to the app and you can talk to anybody over an extended period of time as long as the campaign is functioning, right? And you can still ID those folks. So it changes the definition of what a campaign volunteer is, as opposed to being just like an instanced thing. And you are a volunteer as long as you are a supporter and as long as there is a campaign. Right.
So when you're creating, so actually, what sort of you already mentioned that you created this app because you saw there was a need for this sort of different approach to canvassing. When did you sort of have this, I guess, moment where you realized that, oh wow, we have something here?
I think it was a rolling set of realizations, because initially it really was just a solution to a set of problems that we had internally. I think we began to realize that this was something of a kind of a radical shift when we took a look at the number of IDs that we were coming in, because typically progressive campaigns or campaigns in general don't pump out the IDs to the extent that our campaign was, and that's testament to the fact that that Ocasio 2018's campaign was unique in that it was fully focused on field operations. We were not paying anybody else because we didn't have the money to, right?
Right.
We weren't paying fancy consultants to come in and dictate media strategy. Alexandria had a Twitter account, and she had a Facebook account. She has social, and to her credit, she's been incredible at social since the jump, and that's one of the ways that I found out about her.
And to make sure everyone knows, you're talking about before she won the primary, and all those magazines gave her all those free clothing, that free clothing that the conservatives love to show pictures of.
Honestly, we appreciate the free advertising.
Right. That to me was one of the most fantastic. I love conservative memes. They really are. There's a Twitter account that shows that basically it's called like boomer memes or something, because that's really what they are. It's like wow, like if my dad was a conservative, this is what he would put together.
I know, man.
But let's get back to the app. So you guys focused obviously on canvassing and on the ground work to really spread the word. And so just how to really make people understand, I guess, if you haven't canvassed before, if you haven't volunteered for a campaign, maybe everything that Leo just said is a little bit like, just sort of like, oh, that sounds interesting, but what does it mean? Well,
right.
What it means is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign using this app was able to get some very real world results out of it. Tell us what those results were.
So to kind of put this into perspective, in 2014, the total number of votes that Crowley received in 2014 during that midterm was about 47,000, if I remember correctly. Alexandria doubled that and then some. She ended up netting 100,000 votes this past Tuesday, which is far and away it's really rare. It's somewhat unprecedented, and we saw just a massive outcry. And a lot of those folks are people who haven't voted before. A lot of those folks are people whom probably wouldn't have been spoken to before had the campaign had not taken this new kind of perspective on what a campaign is supposed to look like. Now, that's not to say that we didn't do a lot of on the ground walk list and canvassing. This was supplementary to all of that. We still used Minivan, right? We would still use it to generate walk lists, especially for folks who had canvassed before. But what this was supplementary, and it ended up supplementing everything in a really huge way. As a result of our primary victory, in which we also had about 60% increased turnout over the last primary in 2014, or the last primary area election, if I'm recalling correctly, and I could be wrong. But since then, we ended up taking this app. As I mentioned, we rebuilt it, and we ended up working with a couple of other progressive campaigns. And some of those campaigns, I can't really speak to the degree of, to the degree of openness that I would like to, but multiple states across the nation in multiple, for purely progressive campaigns, and we ended up launching across a lot of these, and it ended up making a real difference, especially in New York, but certainly within a couple of the other states, some of which are still up for contest right now.
Right. You're only the technology director for Alexandria's campaign, so you can't speak for those other campaigns.
That's correct.
But I've worked. Everyone on this show knows I've worked for Cynthia Nixon's campaign, and I know I saw that app being used. So I know you can't speak any more to that, but I saw it being used there. So I just to let people know just how much this app is being how this app is being seen by progressive campaigns all across the country. Even though I just literally we're talking about 2 New York campaigns, but really though it is. I can tell you that it's not just those two New York campaigns.
Yeah.
So
central to that, by the way, it's really important to us that we make sure that this is only. So we. After the primary, we had a whole influx of campaigns reach out to us, and we ended up onboarding about 20, something along the lines around 20. We ended up declining a fairly decent amount of them because of that kind of, I don't want to call it a litmus test, but we really wanted to make sure that the campaign shared our values. And when I say our, it's not just me and Jake. There are 5 other people who are working on this with me, or on like a real an ongoing active basis, and another couple, let's say 2, 3, 4 others who are working on this on the back end as well. So this is not just me, and I can't give credit to myself entirely, or frankly at all. I live in awe of the people that I surround myself by and that are surrounding me.
I have to change the way I was promoting this show. I was saying I have Leo Sussan, the only guy who worked on Reach on the.
I would have slept even less than I already did.
So how do you guys? You said you guys are very specific and particular about who gets to use this app, and rightfully so. I agree that's the way to do it. Speaking for myself. So how do you guys pick which campaigns to roll this app out for? Because this isn't. I should also just mention, because just to be clear, this isn't an app that. Well, while it is an app you can just go on the App Store and download, it's practically useless to you unless Leo and his team set the app up for your campaign.
Right. That's correct. So it's a really simple process for us, right? A campaign comes to us, and we vote. The people who are working on this, I think, should have an equal say in the hands in which we put this in. And we do a good job of making sure that everybody who's working with us, stands for the right things. A lot of them worked on Ocasio with me. A lot of them actually were volunteers on that same campaign with me, and I interviewed them and we worked together on that campaign. I knew they were good at what they did. But yeah, we vote. If it's above 60%, then we take the campaign on. For the campaigns that we've approved of, there have been rarely votes that were under, let's say, 80% or so. Yeah.
So you've created this app that, without a doubt, is at least bringing out new voters at the very least to vote for these progressives. You're able to draw in people who aren't on this list of predetermined likely to vote people that the Democratic Party has put together. You're able to basically find people who not only may not be likely voters, who would come out and vote for your candidate, but you're also able, I assume, to find people who have not even registered to vote.
Say that one more time. I apologize.
No problem. You're able to also find people who haven't even registered to vote, I assume.
It's actually something that we're working on. And so if you think about the database that we're working off of, it is the registered list of voters in the state.
Right.
Now, one thing that we're actually working on now is the capacity to be able to stop somebody on the street who has not voted before or is not registered, and just register them on the spot. That's something that we've been really excited about. That's something that a lot of campaigns have voiced interest in, and it's something that, frankly, excites the crap out of me. Like, I love the thought of being able to enfranchise whole groups of folks that just haven't been before. It's really important to me that that's something that happens. And we put a large amount of focus on registering voters pre-election. I want to make that easier for everybody. So that is something that we're working on.
I actually think that would be, this app, it's as it exists right now, is already, changing the way these campaigns are doing their ground game. But if you guys were able to come across someone, talk to them, they're really interested in your candidate, but they say they're not registered to vote yet. If you could register them on the spot or get them set up to vote in some way, I mean, I can't imagine. Listen, I remember, I can't remember the candidate, but my girlfriend's grandmother could not stop talking about a candidate who knocked on her door. And this was like about 4 to 6, maybe even 8 years ago. I can't remember. It must have been the first candidate who knocked on her door. And when it came time for election day, she specifically went out and voted for that candidate because someone knocked on her door. And I'm sure, actually, she would have done that even if it wasn't the candidate herself who did it. If it was just someone knocking on her door and reaching her directly. Now, she was registered to vote, but I can imagine if that's just your feeling, someone having that face-to-face interaction to begin with. If you also registered that person to vote, I can't imagine them not going out to vote for you. They would feel obligated to, I feel like.
I mean, it's a good theory. I think what I'm focused on typically. I mean, in this particular case, I agree with you. I think that might be the outcome. In my personal opinion, even if that person does not agree with you politically, I think it's important that folks who are not engaged in the political process or engaged in the electorate at all they should vote regardless of who they are voting for. That's my personal kind of philosophy. But I agree with you. I think that would have unintended consequences like that.
You're going to be very mad at me when you hear that I broke into my local post office and stole all the mail-in ballots from people labeled Republican. Oh boy.
This is why I knew it. I knew it was something.
So, I think this is fascinating because on this show especially, and generally my beat in this realm is I talk about, a lot about how technology sucks when it comes to how it interacts with our real lives, especially in the political world. The big companies like Google and Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, I could go on, have really shown that they, for all the money that they make, they really were not prepared for their platforms and their tools to be used in a fashion that really was, still to this day, in many ways, detrimental to so many, I don't know, people in general. From harassment campaigns to fake news, propaganda, voter suppression. It's really a breath of fresh air to talk about technology on this show, Doomed, in a way that makes me feel not doomed.
I mean, I think so. I agree with you. I think that the technology sector has a lot of cleanup to do for having gone through the I guess ill-fated having taken the ill-fated decision to go as full-fledged and full force into creating these new kind of lines of communication that we now have without necessarily creating guardrails between which we can operate. Right, I agree with you there. And what I will say is, and this has nothing to do with the organizations or the folks that make the decisions at Facebook. I agree with your Twitter or Google. I think that there's a great deal of change that needs to occur behind the scenes. But I think that one of the kind of unintended consequences of these companies existing and of creating the level of expertise that they do is that campaigns like ours kind of benefit unintendedly. Like my background was in working on a number of, I used to work at a really large agency, and I would work on, people like American Express's campaigns in advertising. I would do coding, and I was actually run the ads for them. I would do digital kind of ad management for them and write programs to make it easier, etc. I worked for a lot of these big organizations. I don't think I would be possible had I not had that background. Right, and so I think what might occur, I certainly hope this occurs, and this I could be completely wrong, but that the unintended consequence of these organizations existing and of creating the level of expertise they have created is that that expertise ends up kind of benefiting organizations that are using that expertise to solve real problems in the political space and in the, let's say, like even in the nonprofit space, there's a ton of issues that can be solved by technology.
Right.
Hopefully what ends up happening, that expertise filters through and we all end up benefiting from that fact. That said, Google and Facebook and Twitter and all of the large kind of tech companies, they need to really self-evaluate and rethink the way that they approach product development, especially for products that affect all of us to such a large degree.
Right. That's perfectly said. Really, when you said unintended consequences, I'm thinking, uh-oh. What else have they done? But then, unintended in a good way is that there's all these people who are, I guess, we're able to learn new things, connect with new people, take advantage of whatever systems were in place at those big companies to use for their own projects or their own whatever. And, I guess I'm assuming, after, 2016 and Donald Trump, a lot of people have felt that they need to step up and jump into the political realm.
Yeah, I mean, everybody that I worked with on Ocasio's campaign had not, with some exceptions, had not worked in politics before. Definitely not myself. Certainly not my co-founder. My co-founder, by the way, to put some context to Jake. Jake's story is really interesting. He's a lighting designer on Broadway and on related shows. And he came out of the woodwork and designed an app in 24 hours. I mean,
that's awesome.
it's crazy. It's objectively insane.
Maybe we need to be looking around on more Broadway sets for our future tech geniuses.
Look, man, I'd imagine the next who we call Steve Jobs. I'd imagine the next one of them is building a set as we speak.
That'd be awesome.
So I think so.
So, also I think that it would be really nice if every time someone wanted to join Facebook or Twitter, Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and anyone else working on those platforms, those respective platforms, had to vote based on how progressive that new user.
Something tells me that's not scalable for that degree, but
only let those people on the platform. A lot of problems will be solved. It'll definitely get rid of the Nazis. I can guarantee that.
That's not a problem. I think I can solve right now. But I'd love to try.
Right. So how did you get involved with, I should have asked you this at the beginning, but I'm so enamored with this app. So how did you get involved with, because you said you were sort of inspired by Donald Trump. Not quite in that way, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, this is not a new, I'd imagine this is going to be a very common narrative. But November 2016, not the best of months in my recollection. Sorry to cut
you off, but it's amazing how many people gave shit to what's her name, Susan Sarandon, for saying how Donald Trump was going to bring about this sort of revolution, and everyone took it as her meaning it like, oh, it's great that he. No, what she meant is like people, just like what happened when George W. Bush took us into Iraq. People became motivated, like they wanted something to. They didn't want something, but they saw something that needed to be. I hate to use this word, resisted. and that's sort of what happened here. Like, she wasn't saying I want Donald Trump because of this reason, but she was saying that people like Leo here were going to see how bad shit was, and he was going to say, I want to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the lines of delineation between people with skill sets that are typically not applied on the campaign and political level, the lines of delineation have become kind of blurred a little bit. It's very easy, in my opinion. It's much easier to kind of reach out and communicate with somebody on these campaigns. So I actually my first interaction with any sort of political kind of work was actually not. Ocasio was actually this fellow in Michigan. His name is Abdul El Sayed. He was running for governor at the time. Progressive candidate, just an incredible candidate. Doctor, would have been the first Muslim governor in a state in the United States. And I heard him speak. I heard a speech of him on YouTube and thought this guy's incredible. And so. Credit to my girlfriend, I said, I want to do something here. And so we guessed the campaign manager's email address. We found his name on LinkedIn, guessed his email address. I was like, hey, I think this is your email address. I really want to work on this campaign. And after 49 emails or so, he finally got back to me. He's like, yeah, sure, dude, whatever. Like, okay, well, you can help. So I ended up doing some very haphazard stuff. Did a little bit of design work. Worked on some kind of visual collateral. And then I heard about this, the Justice Democrats endorsed him, and I was like, okay, what is JD doing in our area? What in my area? That's how I heard of this woman who was running a long shot political campaign outside of my backyard in my district. I live in New York 14. I live in Queens. So went out.
We're neighbors.
Exactly. So I went out. Decided to sign up for at the time she was petitioning to get herself on the ballot. Went out and met her on the first day when I was petitioning, and just got a chance to hear her speak, especially to another voter, like one-on-one. Put this guy completely at ease after having had a long conversation with me in which he was expressing all of his frustrations. Took her 2 or 3 minutes to put him completely at ease, and I was just floored. But I had to be involved with that kind of just talent. So that's how I got started. It was, it's like that, random inspiration plus social media. And man, is she good on Twitter.
So I think I've told you this before, actually. I think her campaign might have been, and I believe, from what I understand, from what I've read, she was responsible for most, if not all, of what was going through social media. You could tell me if I was wrong about that. But it was probably the most social media savvy political campaign I've ever seen. With the way through interactions, through just use of what was going on and being plugged into the talk of whatever was being talked about in multiple different political bubbles on Twitter. Also, it was very active on social media. It wasn't like I was like, oh, there's the 2 tweets a day from that politician that I usually see. They're done for the day.
Right. I think she had a theory that, well, and in fairness, I think a lot of us learned the power or the potential power of social media in the political escape when Trump won. A lot of that is he certainly attributes a lot of it to his victory. I'm not sure how true that is, but regardless, that thought is out there. Alexandria took it really seriously. It's a window into the lives of everybody whom she's going to represent on a regular basis. So that's her tweeting. That's her on Facebook. It's not it's not a person in the back of a room who's coming up with pithy phrases to say, which is what ends up happening. Usually, a lot of political figures, they have somebody do their Twitter or they have somebody do their social media. Alex, that's all her, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why it was as effective as it was. It's her voice. I mean, and she's authentically speaking through it. No one is speaking for her.
Right. You could tell. I mean, you could just tell. And also, I love that, and I don't love it in a positive way, but it made me feel even more like it's not a surprise, but just to see this from someone who's been elected to office, that story where she is trying to figure out what to do between now and January with moving to D.C. I mean, I don't love that she's going through that, but it's nice to see, if you get what I'm saying, that there's going to be a politician in Washington that literally is us. She is one of us. And it's not a surprise after following her online and her campaign and what's been going on with her campaign over these months. But still, just to see it, it's like, this is how, this is not how it should be where they can't find housing, but this is how it should be in terms of all these people should be us. Yeah.
Now, this is we are as face value as it gets. We are exactly as we appear to be. There is... there's no man behind the curtain who's operating puppet strings. Alexandria is as she represents herself to be, and I think that's one of the main reasons why voters connect with her so well.
All right, just giving myself a note that when Soros comes on this show, not to ask him.
Ask him for our checks. We're just waiting.
So let's if you have some time still, let's shift to just how this app and obviously technology as a whole. With this app in mind as like the really a major thing that I think is going to be used in even more campaigns in the near future. How does this look for progressives going forward? We already saw these. I know there's a lot of debate online right now about whether who really won the midterm elections so far. Were they the progressives or were they the centrists? Because there were some big progressive losses and there were some big centrist losses. Right. If you ask me personally, the progressive losses are not losses yet. They're actually still being counted.
Right.
And they also got closer than anybody else. And this was in the face of really unprecedented voter suppression. Right. Whereas the centrists that lost were pretty much, at least the main ones, the star centrists, if I can say, were incumbents who really, being that they weren't incumbents, should have handily won their races.
Yeah, I mean, so there's going to be a million takes, right? Everybody's going to have their opinion.
But ours is right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm of the belief that I think that what voters are looking for is, honestly, I think that voters connect with somebody whom kind of projects and feels similarly to themselves, and I think the kind of the generalized emotion that exists on both sides right now, both on the kind of Democratic side and the Republican side, is this righteous anger, or this not even anger, this righteous kind of conviction that we all feel or we all feel like on a regular basis. We all feel that something is just not right, and it frustrates us. It's frustrating to watch the country, regardless of what your position is, move in a direction that you don't want it to be. Everybody feels like they're under attack right now, and so I think one of the things that sets, in my opinion, good candidates apart from great candidates is they are not afraid to stand for the values and beliefs that they ascribe to. And you can see it. You can see when someone's trying to toe the line, when someone is trying to kind of like walk, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. It's not convincing, right? I think that the candidates who can walk up on stage and say, "This is what I believe. This is what I think. This is how I think the country should operate." Those are the people that end up, in my opinion, those are the people who end up winning. Those are the people who end up being remembered. And I think that on the progressive side of things, we think about Stacey Abrams, we think about Gillum. What we don't think about, and I apologize, I'm blanking on the name right now because this is a brand new development, is that the Ossoff race, who just went today,
right.
And the person who won it is for single payer and was a gun control activist, right? Ossoff was a little bit more, middle of the road. He was towing the line a little bit.
Lucy McBeth,
thank you. That is major. That's major news, and that's a huge upset. The last race for this seat spent the most money in any congressional political campaign ever, right? So, is it money that wins elections? It can help, but I in my estimation, I think that the candidates who feel that can answer the question, "Why are you running?" with real passion and conviction, and B, go and are out on by themselves, early. Alexandria was running since 2017, so out early, talking to people, building their ground game, and C, taking this ethos that everybody is worth talking to and everybody is worth turning out, and regardless of who you voted for in the past, or if you voted in the past, you should be involved in the political process. Your voice should be heard. Those are the candidates that I think are going to lead the country in the years to follow.
Right, I completely agree with you. And Lucy McBeth's story is really incredible. Her son, which inspired her to really get into the race. Her son was, I'm sure a lot of listeners are familiar with this story. Her son Jordan was the kid who was killed outside of it was like a fast food restaurant or something like that. But he was in the parking lot in his car listening to music, and a white guy comes up to his car, and she and her son are black. And this white guy comes up to the car and tells the kid that his music is too loud. And because they didn't turn it down, or they didn't turn it down low enough to make this white guy happy, he opened fire in the car, literally shot at this car, and her son Jordan was killed. And that's an incredible story that she
can't unfeel that.
Right. And it inspired her not only to, and I don't know where I'm sure she was, I don't know where her progressives were, her politics were before that, but she clearly is now ran as a progressive, and her life was clearly shaped by that event, and she was just legit. She ran, as her raw self, and she won, just like you were saying. Those are the people who are going to win.
I agree. I really think that. And
Reach will be there to help them.
That's the goal. I mean, and that's the kind of the interesting thing about Reach. It really only is it's as good as it's as effective as you are able to inspire people to use it. It is built to be used by lots of people for a long period of time, and so it's meant to harness every smidgen of kind of inspirement that people feel. That's not a word, but if you feel that conviction and you want to help this candidate that shares that with you, you should be able to. And that's not really what has happened thus far. I think we can help make that occur.
Right. You just actually made me think of something. Just to jump back into the app, actually, so typically we're grabbing information when we use canvassing apps, like I guess confirming when you're doing door to door, you're confirming the person's name, where they live, and their contact information, and then just basically getting their hot or cold feeling on your candidate. Is that correct?
That's a generalized read, yeah.
So what else can we grab? Is Reach grabbing anything more than that?
So as of right, so you can, if you talk to a person on the ground. And right now, the core kind of use case for the app is one-on-one communication with a voter of any stripe, of any color, creed, or caliber. What the future holds, that unopinionation kind of philosophy that we spoke about earlier, I think that what will inevitably occur is that the kind of the modes of communication will begin to diversify a bit. So right now, there's a lot of, if anybody's worked on a campaign, or certainly if you've ever even touched a campaign website, you've probably received a fairly large amount of text messages. If you haven't, that campaign is not doing their jobs right. That is the means of communication that we engage in are changing as rapidly as our society is. And campaigns have to meet people where they are, regardless of whether that be in the digital space or in real life, where they are. So we're thinking about how can we kind of extend the canvassing process outside of just these traditional lines and move into the world of zeros and ones. We've made some progress on that, actually. We're testing a little bit with kind of talking to somebody on social media and then being able to mark them in Reach. That's something that's a beta that I've been kind of playing around with, certainly in the days prior to the election, and that resulted in some actually a fairly large amount of IDs. So that's something that we're considering kind of systemizing. There's a lot more to talk about, but
so basically, you're saying like with this in mind, and this is another thing that really is going to really affect, I think, the future of this one feature within Reach that you guys are working on, really affect the future of progressive campaigns. So what you're saying is like you'll be able to gauge interest from social media users just as if you were door-to-door canvassing them, and you'll be able to add them into the system, and then like if they were traditionally being reached out to on the ground, they'll then be able to be put on any whatever text message list or contact list, email list, whatever you guys use, whatever method of contact you guys use or any campaign uses to basically continue to stay in touch with voters so that when the day comes, they'll go out and vote for the candidate.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
That is crazy. That is insane. Because really, I feel like, social media up to this point is just, even if a campaign has millions of followers, they're from everywhere. You can't tell who those people, A, are going to vote, and then B, are even eligible to vote for that candidate. I've seen races where people are like, oh, look, the Democrat has like 100,000 followers on Twitter and their Republican opponent has 5,000 followers on Twitter. And then the day comes and the Republican wins.
Exactly. And yeah, there's a significant number of reasons why that may or may not be. You can't apply the same kind of construct, certainly like in the communication standpoint on every race. But take that for example, a person who engages with 100,000 people, assuming that they're in district or eligible voters, knowing who those people are, the folks who are following you on social media, they see what you're doing on a regular basis. They see what you're talking about and saying. They can sense the courage, the conviction that you have on a regular basis. Those are real followers. Those are real people, and you should be able to kind of get them to come out and help you out and pursue their ideals for what the future should hold. So that's very much within the kind of the ethos that we're going for.
That's awesome. I think, and I guess that it would be good to end on this discussion, and that is obviously we are still far out from 2020.
Right.
But looking at the races that are coming up in 2019, it's going to be just based on where you live, whatever is going on in your state, and even beyond that, probably your county or your district. Yep. Which are important races, obviously. I know here in Queens, we're going to be voting for a new DA.
Yeah.
Our DA is retiring, and he sucks. He's really bad.
He's been there for a very long time.
Like 20-something years, yeah. Or 30, long time. And he's
Right.
actually the only DA who hasn't changed the way he's prosecuting low-level, like, minor crimes. Even Staten Island has a DA who's better at that, at reforming that than our Queens DA. So that's going to be a huge race for us. But everyone else, I think, is looking at 2020. And usually maybe I'd say we're too far out or whatever. But actually, with the amount of Democrats that are going to throw their hat in the ring, it seems like, I don't think we're too far away. In fact, when I last spoke to you for the Mashable piece a couple days ago, I told you that these candidates should start jumping into the race what is now yesterday.
Yeah.
And I'm looking and no one's jumped in yet. But
Except for Avenatti.
Right, except for Avenatti, who I hope he's the first to jump in and also the first to jump out.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, nothing against Mr. Avenatti. I think that one of the reasons why Trump stood out, and I talked to you about this, but one of the reasons, in my opinion, why Trump ended up kind of taking as much fire as he did, is that he was very clearly not one of the other 20 candidates that were running in that same year. Right. One of the hardest things to do in a loaded primary like that is to stand out. And you had 20 other lifelong politicians, and Donald Trump. And so it's hard not to see the the massive carrot that's sticking out of the haystack,
Right.
So Avenatti, I think, shares similar kind of properties. He's clearly not a politician, and he has a lot of courage, and he sounds very kind of brash and loud. And I think he has the same. He could very well stand out in a very similar way. I personally would vote for other candidates. I would love to see Bernie run again. I have nothing against Elizabeth Warren. I would love to see her, run as well. But that's my personal. That's what keeps me up at night right now.
Right. I mean, if Avenatti came up to you and was like, "Hey, asshole, let me use your ass," because I feel like that's how he would ask you. Actually,
that's about right. Yeah.
I'm assuming the vote would not be in his favor.
Well, that's the beauty of it. On the one hand, I don't know what the vote's going to be. On the other hand, so I can just shirk out of that responsibility. But right. I truly don't think that would be something that we would. And I can't speak for everybody, but I don't think that was something that would pass muster.
All right, I think we've broken news here. Leo Sussan's reach vote is a no on Avenatti. So everybody else. Everybody else, take that into consideration.
You did not hear that.
So let's so I think actually, and speaking of let's talk about Warren for a minute. You have some time still, or you gotta jump? I don't want to hold you too late.
No, let's talk.
All right, cool. So speaking of Elizabeth Warren, I was really. I assume again. This is just my opinion. Everybody, no breaking news here. Someone like Elizabeth Warren would use the reach app, but that aside, the DNA thing really bugged me, and I don't think that's a future progressives wanna sort of look towards. That in the future will be really taking President Trump's bait. I don't think we should be doing that. He's not a smart guy, so he didn't purposely leave the bait out for her, which almost makes her move even more foolish because there was no reason for her to do that. It just was unimportant to, the only people who were calling her Pocahontas, that racist, horrible term, were people who are in no way going to not vote for Trump. So who she was trying to win over, I don't know. I don't understand what the end game was there, what the thought process that went through, hey, let's take a DNA test and show that I'm one, I don't even know, it was some ridiculous number, 350th percent, like 1 out of 300, I can't even say it. It's like one ridiculous percentage.
It wasn't a very large number.
Yeah, which I get, fine. But if everyone took this DNA test, they would find that they're probably surprisingly something they didn't think they were, or some very small percentage of a minority group. That doesn't make them black or Latino or whatever, because it's just not who their identity is. It's not the experience they've had. It's not how they've grown up. It's not who their parents and their grandparents necessarily are. It's just not the point that was being made here.
Right. So my opinion on Elizabeth Warren, and I'll try to be brief. I think that it was it wasn't the best of decisions, in fairness to her, and frankly, I think it was more about, if I had to make a guess, I think it could very well have been someone taking the bait. To give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe it was a personal story that the Pocahontas comment is in reference to about her parents and their background. I had imagined that there's some sort of kind of relevance to her but I don't know if I would have politicized it to the same degree personally, right? And no disrespect to her, I think and we talked about this a little bit, but some of the bills that she's put out this year are really quite they're very progressive and really interesting, and things that I would like to see live. Like she's got one bill right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's a housing bill that's on the floor that she's co-sponsored. I think it's if I'm not mistaken, the name is the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act, if I'm not mistaken. That's something that she created. There's also a corruption bill that she's put out there that would ban anybody who's in government from ever becoming a lobbyist. I think that those are great kind of steps in the right direction, certainly a progressive direction.
Right.
It's just really unfortunate that she ended up pissing everybody off this way.
Right. I think, don't get me wrong, I think Elizabeth Warren, I'm a fan of hers. I think she's one of the good ones. There's very few of them in politics, and she's one of them. And I'm speaking strictly to strategy. It was a bad strategy, and I think it gives us a look into how she would run a campaign against Trump, and I don't think that's a winning campaign to run against Trump. Taking him head on, playing his game, it's just not what's going to defeat him. And I also am in the camp that she is really good at a particular thing, and that's taking on Wall Street, taking on the big banks, taking on the financial sector. She's incredible at it. Why take her out of the Senate where she's in the position to do that at a level that she can actually do better there than she could actually do as president, actually, with her role on the Senate and the committees she's in?
I think, it comes down to her choice, right? Like, no one's going to yank her out of her position and they enforce her to run for president.
Right.
I respect her deeply. I love Bernie Sanders. I would love to see him win and become president. I think that would be fantastic for our country. I see the deficiency in. It's tragic that she ended up making a decision that ultimately ended up alienating her from a group of people that she very clearly feels a great deal of sympathy for. If I'm not mistaken, she also co-sponsored a bill that deals with a lot of Native American issues this year, and it's something that she genuinely believes in. But it wasn't. It certainly could have been handled in a much better way. I'd imagine that they would agree with that too.
Right. I think actually, speaking to that, of course, she's come on the right side, obviously, of those issues, but she's actually, I remember, Native American groups were very disappointed in how late she was coming out against the Dakota Pipeline. I feel like, one of the things that is a constant criticism of Bernie is that he is bad on issues that relate to minorities. And I don't think he's actually bad on those issues. I just think he's not good at centering those issues. Because he usually is one of the first people, actually, to speak out for progressive causes that directly affect blacks and Latinos and the LGBT community. He's just not good at centering those as good as he can, honestly. It's one area he's always sort of been weak on. But I don't see where Warren picks up on that. If anything, actually, she's worse. Like one of the centrist Democrats, or like the Hillary Stan Democrats, one of their biggest pet peeves of Bernie is that they say he's like on one issue, the 1%, the billionaires and the millionaires. But if that's their problem with Bernie, Elizabeth Warren is actually even more centered on strictly her one issue, the financial sector, than even Bernie, because she doesn't even give the lip service usually to those sort of issues that Bernie speaks out to. Like, yeah, she'll support the bills and come on the right side of the vote. But when I think of who's speaking out about this civil rights issue, Elizabeth Warren usually isn't on the top of my list of a voice I hear loudly talking about whatever that policy or whatever that proposal may be.
Right. I mean, so the way that I conceptualize it, I think that, as somebody who's now watched a person go from kind of somebody who was just a bartender a couple of months ago, right, or someone who was just sitting in a bar, to a complete celebrity overnight, to somebody whose opinion everybody decides, everybody rests on and waits for, I think, and everybody has their own take. It's kind of changed my perspective on how, I guess, personalities in politics are branded or conceptualized by folks. I think that I personally believe that in general she's, again, as you said, she's one of the good ones. I don't think that Bernie or her are bad on these issues of multiculturalism and of looking out for people on the lower rung of the economic ladder. I think that their means of thinking about about the problems of this that exist in this country stem to the economic kind of conditions that folks either have to subsist in or are born into or are kind of have to deal with on a regular basis. That's their kind of operating theory, and they don't speak to kind of the ways in which what they'll do is they'll speak to the ways in which that individual kind of issue affects different kind of sects of the population. They'll say that the millionaires and the billionaires, the way that the extraction from our economy into the pockets of the corporate donors that we experience on a regular basis today, that affects the Black community in a certain way, and it affects the Latinx community in a certain way. I think that's how I've conceptualized them. But everybody's got their take,
Right. Right.
So that's how I think about it.
Right. Well, the right take is definitely that we do not want Cory Booker. We do not want Andrew Cuomo. Oh, God, that would... I dread the thought.
No disrespect to him. Just stay governor of New York, please.
I don't even want him to stay that.
That's fair.
We definitely do not want Joe Biden, who, for some reason, thinks a winning strategy is going out and making it quite clear that, A, we don't want to blame the wealthy, but we do want to blame millennials. I don't know what his thing is. He's constantly saying we shouldn't blame wealthy people, whatever. And then in the very same breath, he's saying millennials should stop complaining about how hard their lives are. It's like really stunning. It's like, oh, he's going for the reverse Bernie strategy.
I got to do my research. I'll tell you right now, I don't really know enough about Joe Biden, but I wasn't. I mean, in fairness to him, I give a great deal of respect for anybody who's in that. Everybody has their kind of take on how the Obama presidency went. My personal take is that he certainly made a lot of. He kind of paved the way for a lot of folks who probably wouldn't be considered as electable. And Alexandria talks about kind of the concept of electability and how it's been detrimentally used to kind of silence the voices of people of color, certainly, and the folks who are typically disenfranchised. So I think that in many respects, I have a lot of respect for that ticket. From a top-down approach. I have a lot of disagreements certainly with regards to immigration and in the kind of the way that the profit motive kind of affected how we fight wars on a regular basis. They certainly played right into that as well. That's my personal take on it.
Right.
So everybody's got their ups and downs. I don't really know enough about Joe Biden to say, but I'm not gonna. I'd almost certainly support another candidate over Biden if he were to run.
Right. Yeah. Bernie or Elizabeth Warren would make me quite happy. I just worry that Elizabeth Warren would not go after Trump the way. Really, I think the best way to go after Trump is the way that I know Bernie Sanders will. All of his other issues aside, that are any criticism anyone wants to have of him, I most likely agree with you. I was actually, when I was on the Majority Report on that show, that was when the Black Lives Matter activists in 2015 interrupted him in Seattle. And I remember we got a whole bunch of our listeners, criticizing them for interrupting him and going after him on that issue. And I remember I was actually going at them saying absolutely not. They were absolutely right. Best thing possible to do is to push your guy to get as close to perfect as we can get him, and that's what I think they did. But all that aside, I think Bernie Sanders will go after Trump in the way you need to go after him, and that's attacking his fake populism. A billionaire cares about the working class, a guy who is literally fucked over any working class person who's ever worked for him. Right. He cares about the working class. Or we could put up a guy, but in response to that, I should say, we could put up a guy who has literally decades of experience showing up on the front lines of the picket lines with a bullhorn, standing with those workers. One of the poorest members, and again, even with that in mind, he's also extremely wealthy comparatively to us, but one of the poorest members of Congress. I think that's really the answer to it. You don't need to go toe to toe and think of a quirky nickname for Donald Trump. Like you don't need to prove to him that you are what he says you aren't. Yeah. You just need to say, this guy says he cares about you. This is what he does. I actually care about you. This is what I'm going to do. And not only am I going to do this, I have a history of advocating for these things because I've always felt this way about helping you guys.
Right. I think that, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the person who comes out and who conveys the kind of that righteous kind of indignation and righteous, discontent that we all feel on a regular basis, that this is just not going to cut it, right? And here's exactly why it's not going to cut it, and properly diagnose it and tell Trump what he is. We know what he is. He tells us on a regular basis, talk about him, but on a more substantive level, talk about how, how these issues affect people. I think that if we talk about these kind of grander effects of society on the individualized lives of everybody on a regular basis, if we have that conversation, and we speak about it with the passion and frankly fury that a lot of us feel on a regular basis, I think that's what cuts through. I think that is what ultimately will happen. As much as I personally dislike, as a New Yorker, I really don't like the guy. But as much as I personally dislike Trump, I think that going after Trump specifically kind of creates that dichotomy that a lot of that he then plays into, right? The us versus them thing, the Democrats versus Republicans. If you're a Yankees fan, you're not going to suddenly change. You're not going to suddenly become a Mets fan overnight just because that's your team. Right. I think if we talk about but if we talk about baseball, like if we talk about the game itself and we talk about how these things need to be rectified and fixed and all of this, and you hear that from I'm a Mets fan, so you hear that from the Mets. Well,
we're in Queens, so it's hard to not be.
That's right. You're a block away or something,
I could throw a rock and hit Citi Field, right?
That's pretty cool. I'll trade with you, man. I would love that.
Right, I'm not a baseball. I like the Mets. They're my team, but that's only because I'm right here, and they've always been my team. I've always lived in Queens, right in this general area. Oh yeah. But I'm not really a baseball fan. So, if they had more like pro wrestling shows at Citi Field, I'd probably be really pumped to live right here. But
I would love to see Mr. Mets take down the term. I don't know wrestling as well. You know what I mean? But
I'd like to see him leg drop Hogan. Right.
That'd be incredible.
No, but I totally get what you're saying, and it makes complete sense. And also, you should add to that, if you are going to go after specific Trump policy, which I think that's an addendum though that doesn't exactly fit into that baseball theory. If you are going to go after Trump policy, you also have to broaden it and say this isn't just Trump policy, this is Republican policy. They'll pretend they're not lock and step with this guy, but they are. They're he's their guy. Yeah. As much as they pretend that, he sent out a naughty tweet with a bad word in it. He's being mean to people in his press conference. They're just saying that. They if anything, Trump actually probably believes in the policy he's pushing less than they do.
That's an interesting theory. That's interesting. I agree. Frankly, this is not what he does, and how he does it are kind of distinct kind of outputs of who Trump is as an individual, and certainly who he is as a cultural kind of cultural just figure, right? What he says is a mess, right? But people focus on that a lot. They say, oh, how dare he call the shithole countries comment, right? As one example. Not a good comment by any means. This man should be condemned. But next couple of days, here he comes, deciding to kind of revoke the rights of ambassadors whom are gay to have their significant others be in the country with them. That's something that happened. That occurrence in and of itself should draw the ire of people more than the shithole comments comment,
right.
Shithole countries comment. But that's not what really. I mean, there was certainly ire to be had. But can you remember the week of coverage that the shithole countries comment got, and the day or two of that the other thing got,
right.
that his band got? So I think there's a discrepancy between the two. You can be against his fiery language as much as you want to. I think at this point it's a given that Democrats are against Trump, right? So talking towards I'm against Trump. I think Trump's like a jerk, and I hate him, and this is what I think we should go, and not in that direction. I think that's kind of given. Every Democrat feels that way, really.
I think though that if Trump fired Trump, some hashtag resistance people would welcome him to the resistance.
Welcome to the resistance.
Right. Yeah. They might even start a GoFundMe for him after he loses his job.
Don't think he needs the money, man. He's been. I don't know what his assets look like these days, but I can't imagine that he's losing money on this.
I gotta say, I'm really looking forward to this Democratic House. I mean, again, after hearing Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer talk, I'm not as excited. But if they actually do what most Democrats, the base, wants them to do, I think we'll be finding out some very fun, interesting facts about Donald Trump.
I don't know how fun they'll be. They'll certainly perk interest.
Bringing up Pelosi and the future Democratic Party. Actually, I got into a little bit of a debate on Twitter the other day where I agreed with someone saying how, say what you will about Nancy Pelosi's politics, she's actually pretty good as the leader in the House, the Democratic leader in the House. She knows what she's doing. I know it's not, I'm not up there with the rest of the leftists who.
Right, that's not a take you'll hear often on Twitter.
Right, and I don't like her politics as someone who gets voted as just a representative. I don't probably agree with her, even though she does actually. If you look through her history, she weirdly has these very progressive moments when you look at her vote. She's not like a blue dog by far. She's not even a centrist a lot of the times. Right. She's just an older Democrat. She has more of these establishment positions on some things, but again, not all. But she's fairly good actually at being the leader and making sure that House Democrats, she whips up their vote to get them to vote to get them to stay together and vote on something. I mean, you have to give her some credit for what just happened during the midterms, especially when you take what I just said and put it in the context of Chuck Schumer. That spineless, good for nothing. Really, just unbelievably how bad this guy is at his job.
Here's what I think. Go ahead.
He should not be. He was made the Democratic leader when everyone thought that Hillary Clinton was going to become the president, and he had a good working relationship with her from when they were both New York senators, and they thought, oh, it's going to be wonderful. They're going to be, working together perfectly. They're gonna have a mind meld or something. But that's not what ended up happening. So we end up having this guy who's weak in every way imaginable, literally the opposite of a Harry Reid, leading, I should say, the Senate Democrats, and he's horrible at it. He gave away these judicial seats, basically so. Basically, now that we know how the results went, he gave away these judicial receipts for Senate Democrats to have a couple extra days to go home and campaign, and we now know they lost. So he gave away these seats to lose these lifetime appointments, I should add,
Right.
to lose Senate seats that would have only been for 6 years anyway if they won.
Right. So yeah, I mean, in that decision, there lies a lot of assumptions. Right. Assumption number one is that going home is going to make a difference. Right. That was the grand deal that he made was like basically Mr. McConnell, or what's this? Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think of him as the turtle. So
Right.
the turtle fellow in the Senate. He basically was holding the Senate in session and hostage, and so that Democrats couldn't go home and campaign. And so what he told Schumer is, "I'll let you guys go, but you have to give us a couple of judicial nominees." Now, those nominees, they're there. From my understanding, they're there for life. These are Trump
Right.
Judges that are not going to go anywhere for as long. Even when Trump leaves, they'll still be there.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. They have to retire or drop dead for those seats to become open again.
Exactly. So is it worth a chance at victory, a small chance at that, to get some of these folks out of that, out of chamber in order to go home and campaign? I personally don't believe that's the case, but on the other hand, it's not like the Republicans weren't campaigning for those same seats. They have just as much to lose by staying there.
Right.
So you could make the argument that you're negotiating from a position of weakness if the presumption is that you don't care about, or that the Republicans don't care about going home and campaigning.
Right.
So in that respect, I think it was, in my personal opinion, I think that was not the best of decisions by any means. In terms of Nancy Pelosi, there's a lot of her history in Congress is long and dotted with a number of successes, and she to her credit, probably would never do that. Like, would never do what in my opinion, I don't believe she would ever do.
Right.
Make that kind of bargain that Schumer made. Right.
Right.
I think that, on the other hand, the way that progressives feel on a regular basis, progressives feel, okay, well, look at the last 8 years or so, 10 years. We lost 1,000 seats across the country, right? And it's not all due to the leadership at the House level. It's not. I mean, there's a lot of institutional problems that need to be solved in the Democratic Party. But she is a leader of that party, and so who is held responsible if not one of the leaders of that party? Right. So that's where the fury comes from. I subscribe to that. I think that that we should show Nancy Pelosi the respect that she frankly has earned over the course of her, I have no idea how long, career. But I don't think it is an affront to her to suggest that within 2018, 2019, that looking at leadership and kind of considering a new angle on things, it's something that we should at least think about.
Right, for sure. But here's the thing with that, though. Like, for Schumer, I could tell you right now a number of people who I think would be great as the Senate minority leader right now, because they don't have the Senate,
right.
The leader of the Democrats in the Senate. But for the House, there's not a big field of people who are jumping in. Like, I know Tim Ryan from Ohio was her only challenger for that position in 2016, and he's a moderate. He's not someone who's going to bring a progressive, and in fact, he probably would be worse than her at the role. He probably has more moderate voting record than even she has. So if she's going to be replaced, we can't just replace her. It's got to be someone who's worthy of replacing her.
Right.
And I say this again as someone who is not a fan of hers, but can see that she has talent for that specific position. Probably
right.
more talent as as the leader of the Democrats in the House than she actually has as someone who is a House representative. If that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense. I mean, there people have different opinions. I would love to see, if I believe her name. Excuse me, I was going to say boxer. No, Representative Barbara Lee, who's I believe running for Crowley's old position. I think she would make a fantastic leader, and I think that would be a great kind of choice.
Does she want to? You said Barbara Lee, right?
That's right.
Does she want to run though? I don't think. Listen, I actually think.
I don't think so.
Everyone should be familiar with her. She is one of the real progressives in Congress. Like, not someone who just says they're progressive on some. No, like, she's like, if you're a Bernie Sanders fan, you should like Barbara Lee a lot. In fact, She is the only person to have voted against going into Afghanistan in the House. If I recall correctly, I'm like 99% sure on that. And
Go on. Sorry about that.
Bernie went and campaigned with her a couple of weeks ago. When I saw the picture of them together, I was like, oh man, if that was a ticket, if Bernie Sanders and Barbara Lee, and I don't care for this one, I wouldn't care who was at the top, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It could be, you could flip them and I'm fine. But, I also think the age thing will come up as this is an episode about, the future of progressives and, technology plays a huge role and obviously we also are talking about just what the future will look like even beyond just the technology that'll be used to help these campaigns, who these actual people running these campaigns will be. I think, if Bernie Sanders is running for president, he's obviously going to have in mind his age, and he's going to pick a vice presidential candidate who will basically also be voting for with the thought in mind that it's very possible this vice president could become president. That to me was one of the major reasons why McCain picking Palin was so dangerous. It's bad enough that she was, McCain's horrible too, but God rest his soul. But Sarah Palin would have been bad to pick for anybody. But you keep put in mind that he was running for president at his age, and she could have very easily become the president. It's just like that's what made it so scary, which is why anyone running of a certain age will pick a good vice president if they're smart.
I agree. I mean that seems pretty logical.
Right. And I hope it's Barbara Lee if Bernie runs, because that would be a ticket.
I think, I want to say one last. So I think that I agree with you. I mean, frankly, I love Barbara Lee. I would love to see her as the majority leader. I don't. She's definitely not. From my understanding, she's not running for that position. I believe she's stated that assumption, but nothing is really certain ever, right? And something that I've learned in this whole kind of weird journey, it's been only a couple of months. Like, it's been February, March, so not even a full year yet. Thing I've learned, you have more say than you think you do. You have more access than you think you do, because for a number of reasons. Mainly the internet is very much an equalizer in this respect, that anybody can be reached. Anybody can be kind of that's a horrible pun. I'm sorry, but anybody can be reached.
No, it's a perfect segue into your closing words, because I'm going to let you finish. I want you to have the final words, but really, I just want to add that this discussion to me, really, in a sense, technology is going to play a huge role, clearly, in whatever happens in the future in general, even talking outside of politics. But in this context, it's going to play a huge role in our political system. And you are someone who came in and saw a need because you were outside of the box and had the skills, along with half a dozen or so other people who also saw that with you. And you guys came together and created this app, along with, I'm sure, many other things for the campaign that will be spread apart. And we didn't even get to, when you brought up the 1,000 or so races lost. One of the major things is because some of the people who helped Obama win when he won in 2008, after he won, they didn't do what you were doing. They didn't say, how can I help? How can I use this apparatus that I created to help future progressive campaigns? They basically said, oh, look, the private sector now wants to give me a ton of money. I'm going to go work for Amazon. I'm going to go work for Facebook. And they gave nothing to the future of the Democratic Party. Yeah. They did nothing. Yeah. All these folks that helped Obama, that were instrumental to Obama in 2008, did not pay it forward.
Go ahead.
And that, I want you to say, because I think that's so detrimental to how we got here. And really, I wish I brought this up early in the conversation, but you just really brought it up, and it just made me think of it. This is going to be the difference maker. People like you who created this app, who are thinking with the future of the progressive movement in mind, are going to be the difference maker from what we had before. And please take it from there.
Yeah.
And I will not add anything more to it because you're going to have the perfect summary.
I got this.
No pressure.
No pressure. So two things. I think first, Alexandria says something that always sticks with me. She said in her campaign video, and she says this very frequently. We have people and they have money, right? Reach works because people want to change the way that their country is operating right now, is going. Reach only works if that's the case. If only it works if people are willing to step out of their ordinary lives and try to convince somebody else that they should vote, that their voice matters in the same way, that anybody's does. This reach only works if that's kind of a generalized kind of occurrence that's happening in our culture. And I subscribe to the belief, especially after the last couple of months, that people are ready to do this. And so I want to say two things. First, I live in awe of the people around me, of the people who dedicate tons and tons of time that they really don't have and sleep that they're just not getting to build something that really, there was a need there, but it's hard to say I'm going to be the person to do this, right? Like that step, it's not an easy one to make, and these people just made it, on a moment's notice, right? They saw it and they wanted to be part of the future of this country. That is something that I think that more people I think are doing and can do. I mean, you don't really know the value that you have or bring to a campaign until you walk into their offices and say, hey, I want to do something, or email them 49 times straight and say, I really, really want to help, which is what I did, right? It's real. There's always need for people who have the energy and who have the will to go out of their way and do something. I was a volunteer for the entire primary. I became the technology director, not out of preference for preference over other kind of consultants. But because I put in a lot of work and I put in a lot of time and effort into this, it really is possible for anybody to make a difference on the local level and frankly on the federal and state level. You just need to do it. You just need to pick up the phone or pick up your fingers and start typing. And I hope that more people do that.
Leo Sussan, thank you so much for joining us today. Leo is the co-founder of the Reach app. In my opinion, from everything that he's explained to me about it, and from what I've seen of it, actually, I've seen it myself. I think it's really gonna help whatever the future of the progressive movement, whoever I should say it might be. I think it's gonna actually be a critical app used in whatever campaigns are running in 2020 for the Democrats that you guys vote for to use. And also, he is the technology director for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez 2018. Congratulations on the big win. You, without a doubt, played a critical role. And thank you so much for sticking around and joining us. And you could, everyone listening can follow Leo on Twitter at Sussan. Right, that's it, at Sussan. And the Mashable article will be probably coming out tomorrow. And I think for people who might absorb things better when they read something, when they see the words, you'll really get a better sense of what reach is. Because that article focuses on that, and it's really, it's fantastic. The app is fantastic. Leo, take care, man. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Sorry for being so long-winded.
Oh no, I think I could have probably went on for another hour with you. So we gotta hang out one day for sure. We're both in Queens.
Down the block, yeah, of course.
All right, man. Have a good night. Take care.
Take care, buddy.
All right, everybody. I'm just gonna put us back in. I'll read your comments. That was a great interview. It's really important to sort of, on a show like Doomed, to sometimes, just let the victories of the midterms this past Tuesday just really seep in and enjoy them. We have a 29-year-old Democratic socialist going to Congress. I really think we need to just, take that, just take that in, along with the other big wins that day. All right, I'll go through the comments, everybody. And let's see. Yeah, there was an issue earlier first of all, you can support the show by going to patreon.com/MattBinder and becoming a patron. I have some unfortunate news to tell you guys. Now, the Patreon isn't, raking in the big bucks, but it definitely is a huge help in keeping this show going. And for the first time since I started the Patreon a couple of months ago, we actually have less patrons than we started with. The patronage has been on a upwards course this entire time. Every month, at least one or two new patrons. But unfortunately, due to financial issues, and I'm really sorry about that, and I'm happy if you stop becoming, if you don't give me any more money if you are having financial issues, please. I'm not asking, this isn't a call for you guys to become patrons. If you cannot afford to do so, please do not do so. Take care of yourself first. Take care of your family first. But if you can afford to do so, please help the show grow so I can keep it going and even add more to it. This is, in fact, the 4th Doomed episode in the past 2 weeks. I usually only do one episode a week. And, sometimes I'll miss a week and double up the following week, or double up before the month ends somewhere along the line. But I've already given you guys 4 episodes over the past 2 weeks. Because I've just been so inspired by everything going on, and the people who do listen, a lot of you got a lot of listeners actually on the podcast. The download numbers for the podcast are good. They're in the multiple thousands. And I don't do much promotion because I just don't have the time, unfortunately. I wish I did. But I would have more time if this show was more popular, and this show would become more popular if we had more patrons. So patreon.com/MattBinder. Whatever you can do to help keep this show alive and going and growing. And again, only if you can afford to do so. If you can't afford to do so, or would like to know of other ways to support this show, let's think of some ways we can support this show that we haven't talked about before. Let's spread the word. Let's tell people about it. Tell your friends about the show. Doomedpod.com is where you can find the podcast. You could also search Doomed on iTunes, the podcast store, whatever it's called. It's on Google Play. I'm going to get it out to as many other places as possible. Doomed.tv will take you directly to this YouTube channel. That is free to subscribe to. Doomed.tv. Get me more subscribers. I also want to do more individual video content that isn't live streamed, like produced videos, like the Real Fake News series I did for Cafe when I was there. Also, you can support this show by... let's do this. If you guys are in a live stream for another show, like The Majority Part or The Michael Brooks Show, excuse me, you should drop a few Doomed references in there. You should drop the show, a show mention in there. Let people know. A lot of other people watching some of those other shows. And they probably don't yet know about Doomed because I'm so bad at promoting it. Really, I'm a terrible self-promoter. I've talked about that before. You guys know that. Just feel dirty doing it. And I push myself to do it. And because I don't have the experience doing it, I feel like I'm lacking in that area. Don't get me wrong. I'm so talented in so many ways. But that area, not so much. Let's go back to the comments. I'm going to speed through these comments today because we're going a little bit late. And I'm still actually still powering through since the midterms. I'm lacking sleep. I was up that whole night practically trying to see what results came through. And apologies from what I was mentioning before about that double YouTube stream. It's still going, I think. I don't know why there were 2 streams. I will look into that and see to make sure that never happens again. Because it messes with you guys because you're in the wrong stream and you see an empty chat because everyone else is in the other stream. We had Ryan from Ohio in the chat who was shocked to hear me say Tim Ryan from Ohio. No, I wasn't talking about you, Ryan from Ohio. My rep, Brian says, my rep is apparently running for president now, which I consider a loss, LOL. Who's your rep, Brian? MacArthur. We won't win by failing to call out racist. God damn it, Bernie. He doesn't have a chance now. Listen. This is what I think. And MacArthur's talking about that Daily Beast piece that came out earlier. First of all, the Daily Beast piece kept saying that Bernie blamed race for Gillum and Abrams' loss, which is wrong. He did not say that in the piece. In fact, if you listen to the audio that the Bernie Sanders communication director released on Twitter of his interview with the Daily Beast, he interrupts the Daily Beast reporter when the Daily Beast reporter says race-oriented and said, why do we use that phrase? Don't use that phrase. Use the word racist. Racist campaigns were run against Gillum and Abrams. And he even actually corrects him by saying that the votes aren't all in yet, so they haven't technically officially lost yet. But when talking about the voters who Bernie said may have felt uncomfortable voting for a black person, and he said when talking about those people, he said they may technically or specifically or something like that, they may not technically be racist, or said something like that. Now listen, I disagree with that. They are racist. That's a racist act. So they are racist for doing so, for not voting for someone because of their race. So that's wrong. But what he was saying there, and it was weird that a lot of white liberals especially could not see what he was saying. Hit him for the word, hit him for not calling them racist. Absolutely. They're racist. I'm going to say it again. They are racist for not voting for someone based on that candidate's race. But what he's saying is that, and this is, even if you don't want to care about, even the point was made on Twitter by Cynthia Nixon's former communications policy person, Waleed. He mentioned how Gillum and Abrams haven't called these voters racist even. And that's because as a politician, you don't want to alienate people who may actually be open to voting for you. And Bernie even says those people will probably vote for a Gillum or an Abrams next time around. And this is the calculation here. When I bring up these white liberals, listen, racism isn't this sort of thing that only white supremacists and Nazis have. I can guarantee you that everyone at some point in their life has most likely, I would say 99% of people have probably thought something racist at some point in their life. Some of them probably without even realizing it was racist. Because there are a lot of ignorant people out there who are racist. Who, when presented with a new experience or meet new people, it changes them. There's so many stories of someone saying like, I felt this way about people, and then a certain group of people, and then they became my neighbor, and I got to know them, and I realized that I was wrong, and I was racist, and I was ignorant, and I'm not like that anymore. Like, if you're going to believe that everyone who voted for Trump is literally like Richard Spencer, then I don't know what to tell you, because there's a decent amount of people, even if you don't want to believe the majority, enough that matter to help you win an election, who would vote for the Democrat, whether they were white, black, brown, Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander, whatever you want to, whatever, LGBT. They just need to really be reached out to. And when I say that, I also don't mean you change who you are. You do not throw anyone, especially minority groups, under the bus. You do not change your focus. You do not change your policy to reach out to those people. You keep everything, all your principles. But you explain to those people how those policies and those principles and those ideals will benefit them as well. Because they will. They just don't know it because they've been brainwashed by Republicans. They've been brainwashed by the true believers like the Nazis and the white nationalists. That's my calculation. That's my belief there. That's why these politicians say that. That's why Hillary Clinton sort of, shot herself in the foot when she called them deplorable. And I agree. They're deplorable. But there's a good amount of people who went from Obama to Trump. They had no problem voting for a black man for president. They just need to be told that they are being ignorant and they're being wrong and they're really being taken advantage of and voting against their own interests. And enough of them that will matter electorally will come back around without you having to change a thing about your messaging, your policy, your beliefs. It's that simple. It doesn't have to be one way or another. But yes, those people who didn't vote for someone because the guy was black are racist. What the addendum there is some of those people can learn and no longer be that way. And to the ones that can't learn and change, that's when you say, fuck them. All right. I went on a long tangent there. This is going to be a long episode. I'm going to just try to really go through these comments here. A lot of questions about the app. You learn more about the app in the Mashable article, really, because there's not really much out there about the app. Even its own site, reach.vote, is a bit vague because it's really just for progressive campaigns that the team behind Reach want to work with. My dad chimed in when I said if my dad was a conservative, he would make boomer memes, I'm sure. He said, God forbid in all caps. Yes. Sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to. There was discussion about when we were talking about Warren, about why she did what she did. Kennedy said, yeah, I'm in the Warren ruined her chances camp. Vispa said, me too. Renee says, it wasn't a bad idea, but you need action. You want to go native, act it. Nah, I disagree with that, Renee. The Norwegian said she was probably tired with the constant harassment. She never claimed to be native. Yeah, but that's the thing. She could have just continued to ignore it. Like Obama releasing his birth certificate didn't quell didn't silence the people who were racist saying he was not actually born here. They still think he's illegitimate. Ed Norden says she was trying to shut up the birthers like Trump. Yeah, it didn't work. If anything, it just brought that back into the spotlight. Just let Trump say his stupid nicknames. Like Hillary didn't have to go out there and explain why she wasn't crooked. Bernie doesn't have to go out there and explain why he isn't crazy. Why would she go out there and try to explain why she actually has Native American blood? And yeah, the whole thing is sort of that they claim that she isn't Native American, and she comes back with them to them and shows them that, yeah, she actually is just very little bit Native American. Yes, technically she is, obviously, but she doesn't identify as it. She can't identify as it because even Native American groups came out citing their disappointment that she would do this because she's not part of a tribe. She's not Native American in that sense. And come on, if any sort of white male progressive came out and tried to do that shit to show that they really understood what African Americans in this country go through because they're 0.1% black. Are you kidding me? They would have been wrecked online. They'd have been destroyed by progressives for saying that doesn't make you black. You don't identify as black. You're not living the black experience. And that would be absolutely right. That doesn't make you that. That might be your nationality or your heritage or your background, but you can't identify as that. I mean, it's a bad move, really. It's a bad move. I mean, could you imagine if Bernie Sanders tried to show that he understands what it's like to be a certain marginalized group because his great-great-grandma was that, even though he's lived his entire experience as a Jewish white guy. And even being Jewish puts him in a certain distinct category. But that's his experience as a white Jewish guy, born in Brooklyn, living in Vermont. Doesn't matter if he was point something percent of something. He isn't that. So that's my calculation. Does it make me hate Warren? Does it make me want to see her lose? Does it make me not support her? No. I just think it shows that she is not the person to run against Donald Trump. That's all. And the Norwegian saying she never claimed to be Native, then that gave her more of a reason to just continue to ignore this. Unimportant. The people doing the chops when she was running against Scott Brown. You're not going to win those people over. Those are the people. Those are the racists that you're not gonna turn around when we talk about those type of racists. And JJM Hicks, I see as I scroll down, said, in Warren's run against Scotty B, they pled the Native American heritage at every turn. The campaign felt the need to nip it in the bud if she went national to avoid litigation of the issue. It's going to come up again. This has done nothing. Maybe even added fire to them to go after her more on this. Because she's now proven that she's, in their eyes, barely even that. Renee says, support Native causes. That'll make them take her seriously. Kick them in the pipeline. Yeah. JJM says she did it in a very ill-advised way. She should have collaborated with a youth-oriented science YouTube channel to debunk race science and also consulted the Cherokee Nation. I don't know about the first part, but yeah, she should have, without a doubt, worked with a Native American group. Renee says Bernie knows Spanish. She had close ties here in Chile. Kennedy says, I think it's a mixed bag with African American women. I think this is the part of the comments where they were talking about Bernie and his and the critiques against him, and where he's bad or not very good. Edward Norton says, especially the black community. That was my problem with Bernie. Yeah. Edward Norton says, I get pushback that he marched at civil rights. Other than that, he hasn't done tangible. But I mean, listen, I agree with that. But I don't like the downplaying of his civil rights stuff. Absolutely, the criticism should be, there should be more. What have you done since then? But the downplaying of that he was really doing that when it wasn't, during the civil rights era. That I hate the downplaying of that. It's just you can do both. You can laud that and still criticize him on what came after. Just I don't like the downplaying of that. And absolutely criticize him about doing all these. My biggest issue is really who has done better. That's a 2020 candidate. the former prosecutor, Kamala Harris, the guy who defended Mitt Romney and told the Obama campaign to stop attacking him by going after Bain Capital on television. He did this just days before the 2012 election. And the guy who, if you ask anyone in Newark, isn't such a big fan of how he was, of what he left behind as the mayor there. Give me someone, and I'll support them. All these people, all these politicians are bad when it comes to that. Joe Biden? Come on. At least Bernie has the economic issues down right, which will without a doubt help marginalized groups in bigger ways than even white people. And rightfully so. Renee says, focus on economics. The working class is unified. Well, you can't focus on economics because you have to be intersectional. That's what being a leftist is all about. There's not, again, why is there this one or the other with so many people? In every way that we've been talking about tonight almost. You have to center it on economics, civil rights, race, gender, sexual orientation, transgender rights, disability rights. Literally, there's no one without the other. It's all one affects the other for everybody. Which is why I hate the whole thing where, brocialists only care about economic. No, left people, actual leftists and socialists are the intersectional ones. You can't be good in economics if you're not a feminist. You can't be a feminist if you're not fighting for unions. You can't say you're for union rights, labor rights, if those rights don't include blacks, Latinos, transgender people, gays, lesbians, anyone you can think of. It all comes together. Ed says AOC and Bernie 2020. No, let's keep her in Congress right now, where we could use people like AOC. Also, she can't run for that because she's not even old enough. Let's see more comments here. Brian says, one of the troubles with Pelosi is that she draws so much water in California. She shapes the caucus toward the moderate, and it's ridiculous. Right. I mean, I told you, I'm no fan of her in a lot of ways, but as the Democratic leader, especially contrasting with Schumer in the Senate right now, she's certainly more talented. She knows what she's doing in that position. If we're going to get rid of someone, it better be good if we're replacing Pelosi, and also the focus, I think, should be on Schumer. And here's where Ryan from Ohio said, did somebody say Ryan from Ohio when I mentioned Tim Ryan from Ohio? Kennedy laughed when I said God rest his soul before. Vespa, as much as I like that ticket, I think Sanders-Harris is the best bet. I would be for a Sanders-Harris ticket. I don't completely dislike Harris. I don't like her at the top of the ticket. Ocasio-Peck 2020, Alu Akbar, says Renee. Well, for one, AOC is not old enough, and two, the vice presidential candidate should not be someone on the majority report, because I don't know how much that'll translate to votes. That was just my little jab, my friendly jab. Jamie Peck would certainly be a wonderful vice presidential candidate. But again, I don't think she's old enough. Brian says Lee wouldn't dare. She knows that'd be suicide. Pelosi is one vengeful lady. Well, also, I would like to see Lee think bigger than that. You know, if you're going to be the Democratic leader, that's your focus. That's your thing. Brian Kennedy says that's inter doomed live chat banter there. I'll keep that off the audio stream here. The video. This is just for the chat room. Now Kennedy says my state did bad overall, but overall I can see how Dems could win the Rust Belt in 2020. I don't have the guest caller line right now. I have a different Skype username for the guests. So listeners who want to call in, don't interrupt the actual interview of the show. And not enough time to take listener calls today. I will take them next time. Vispa says, I wonder if Sam would shout doomed out on the IMs if I sent him one. He will, I'm sure. So please do so. Please. And everyone should do that every single day until he's forced to shout it out every day. Let that become a running gag. That Sam Cedar is inundated with IMs mentioning doomed. That he has no choice but to shout it out every day, and it becomes a running gag on the show. Renee says, gotta go pro wrestler, challenge Jamal to a fight. Speaking of Michael Brooks. Kenny says, I've never heard of the Minority Report or the Michigan Hooks show. JJM Hicks says, Brooks is very good at reading ad copy. Ask him for tips. Brooks is a self-promoter beyond self-promoters. Michael Brooks would sell himself to anybody if it meant. And I wish I could be like that. I say that in a very serious way, giving him props. While I'm also being sarcastic to knock him because I had so much fun to do so. But no, it's definitely a talent he has that I don't have. But that's also because I have some sort of, I don't know, bar I set. Brian says, hey, Matt, thoughts on Eric Swalwell from California 15 running for president 2020? I'm actually not too familiar with the guy. I've seen his name. I need to do a little bit more looking into that. It's something I should know about, to be honest, but I've been a little behind in some areas. People are now calling the Michael Brooks Show various different names in the chat room. I'll skip that. I'd buy that for $1. Says, sometimes I feel like candidates for like Gillum are only going to get their point across to everybody if they explain every little detail, especially economic policy. Kennedy says, lots of non-hateful racists were turned into hateful racists by Rush Limbaugh and Fox News while Obama was president, I think. Yeah, and you could call them racist because they are racist, but also realize that there's a lot of white liberal racists out there who might be in that category, who can be, or who may once have actually been that way and are now, quote unquote, woke. They were changed. Norwegian says, but lead with your ignorant and wrong when talking about those people. Renee says, yeah, but those guys easily crossed the aisle to the Tea Party to go against the Democratic self-righteous elite. I don't know about that. Kennedy says, like the fact that he wasn't a perfect president made racists hate him even more for being black. Oh, no, they're definitely, I'm not going to say race-oriented because that's wrong, racist issues related to how white people view black candidates, without a doubt. Norwegian adds too, don't undermine the 24/7 hate speak on Fox and Limbaugh. Right. Again, these are people that were brainwashed. As bad as they are in many ways, based on who they're voting for and what they're saying and doing, a lot of them are victims in a way. I'm not saying that to pity them. I'm saying that as a way to say that they can be turned around. Don't give up on all of them. And I feel like I have to add this to them every time before these words get twisted. But you do that without changing anything about you and how you're running, and without swapping focus on the Democratic base. Swapping focus off of the Democratic base, I should say. We are now back to talking Warren in the chat. I buy that for $1 says, Bernie does understand poor working people, though. His VA town hall should honestly be studied for Dem candidates running in the South. That was a good one, yes. Edward says, yeah, I wanted Bernie to do more. I still voted for him. Right. You should want all politicians to do more. And you should continue to push them for as long as they're in office or running for office. The Norwegian says, I have the perfect candidate, Jim Webb. Right, he killed the man. Ed says, I'd ride for Bernie. Jeb Bush says no there. Chelsea Clinton says Kennedy Crutch. What's going on in the chat room right now? Kennedy says there are quote-unquote progressive YouTubers who hate social justice and socialists somehow. Some people just don't. I would like to debate those progressive YouTubers. If you have a specific one in mind, a progressive YouTuber who hates social justice and socialists, send them to me and also tell them that you want to see them come on this show. I'm serious. I don't have enough YouTubers on this show, and I'm trying to grow the YouTube channel, Doomed.tv. If there are YouTubers, and I've told you to send me YouTubers before, because I'd like to really get some sort of network going with them, like how the main right-wing channels on YouTube are all intertwined and connected. I'd like these guys to come on this show, and I'd love to go on their shows, especially these ones I won't agree with. Send them to me in an email or on Twitter or on the Discord channel. Running out of time here in the chat, and also the way these chats work, I won't remember anything that gets lost in these YouTube live stream chats. No, not there. It says actually go to school in Tim Ryan's district. They like him. I buy that for $1 says, I don't know if you discussed this, but do you think Gillum would have won if he ran with Bernie instead of Hillary? I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think he did what he needed to do. I think it was a smart move, obviously, to go with both. Listen, if you're running a race like that and you have a chance to win over the Bernie side of the party and the Hillary side of the party while running more so as a person more in line with Bernie's ideals and everything, then why not do it so you get everybody behind you? Gillum didn't, and Bernie even continues to say Gillum was his guy. Gillum was the guy who ran a Bernie Sanders-like platform. Gillum didn't change to run with Hillary. I'm not against him doing that at all. And I don't think it hurt him at all. If anything, it helped him bring out people and they are part of the Democratic Party base, people who are still with her. Again, my issue aren't people who are still with her. My issue are the people who are the hardcore Hillary stans, that 8%er group who just have this weird hatred of Bernie Sanders because they wrongly understand what happened in 2016. Looks like my new IM name is not Matt Binders is not there. I hope the guest will respond on Twitter, though. I want to flesh his idea out as I was talking about. Yeah, I'm sure he'll contact you on Twitter. Reach out to him. Vispa says, debate the progressive soapbox. Listen, contact that person. Send me their link on email or Twitter or in the Discord channel. Renee says, Jimmy Dore Doomed. I'm for it, absolutely. Again, probably would make more sense in that case for me to go on Jimmy Dore's show. If that was possible. No, but I would have him on. That's me being, joking about him having the bigger platform, and it would help me more to be on that show. But no, if he wants to come on here, I would love for it, and same and vice versa. I'd love to go in there too. Kennedy says the specific YouTuber I have in mind is Kyle Kulinski, but I don't know if he would read my DMs. Kyle follows me on Twitter. I should reach out to him. We've been in touch just over Twitter from retweeting and stuff like that, each other's stuff. But yeah, I should listen for any of these people. If I, as someone who has a podcast, received even just a few, 2 or 3 messages from someone saying you should get this one person on the show, I'd be like, oh, a number of people want this one person on my show. I'm going to reach out to that person. So don't underestimate your power. And if you want to see me on another show, reach out to those people and let them know you want to see me on their show. Renee says, gotta have a t-shirt that says not a sellout. Vispa says, progressive soapbox stands up for Door and is anti-cedar. I'd buy that for $1, get Pac-Man on. Kennedy says the progressive soapbox is a grifter. Hey, I've had grifters on this show before too. You all know who I'm talking about. Brian says A.A. Seaman is always up for a debate. Right. That's Sam Cedar's H.R. Goodman parody. Renee says debate Doomcock. I don't know who that is. Vispa says audience-wise soapbox is appropriate for Doomed. Renee says the Bernie Broyce coiners. Brian says LMFAO, progressive soapbox is a real guy. The Norwegian says you have the same mechanic on the Bernie side, and we need every progressive liberal to vote, no matter which end of spectrum. Exactly. Not There says Jamal Thomas and Matt Binder rage in a cage. Renee says Tim Clark. Vispa says yes. Listen, I will discuss any of these people. You guys know me. I've debated Paul Elam, the guy who runs the biggest men's rights activist website. I've debated callers on the Majority Report. A lot of them, when I was hosting the show, were Gamergators and anti-social justice warriors. I had debates with them when I was hosting on the Majority Report. I've had the Kent State gun girl on this show, and after an interview with her about Turning Point USA, we had a debate. I will debate anybody. I'm not Steven Crowder. I don't claim anybody try to change my mind and then run away from a debate when Sam Cedar is coming to town. All right, everybody. Gone way over, giving you a huge show today. So if you can, as a thank you to me for going so long, give you so much extra content, please become a patron at patreon.com/MattBinder. And if you can't afford to do so, no problem. I totally get it. You got to leave this show an iTunes review. Really simple to do so. Leave a written one with the 5-star rating if you want to give it a 5-star rating. But I'd appreciate the 5-star rating. The written reviews help a lot too. Renee says Matt's a socialist Rey Mysterio Jr. in debates. And Kennedy says, I wish I had been an MR fan during Gamergate. I was a full-time social justice warrior back then. LOL. I like that I'm a socialist Rey Mysterio Jr. That's how I'm going to end the show. All right. See you all next time on Doomed.